Sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good morning, my fellow Michiganders, and good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. I am, of course, your host, Garrett Soldano, and we have our fellow favorite Michigander with all of her wisdom here today again, Meghan Reckling. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
So good to have you on. And not only are we going to get a little bit homesteading at the end, so we're going to save the best for last, but we're going to get into some dirty politics here today. And I want to hit on something that you posted, I think it was last week, which a lot of people need to understand and realize what the Democrats are really good at is a ground game. And that is what they're already putting in place for 2026.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats aren't missing a step, right? They are working on they're a hot mess. Let's just preface it with that. The actual Democrat Party itself they've lost direction. They are infighting worse than Republicans ever have. They can't figure out their message. Well, they can't figure out their message because they don't even have any principles left to stand on. They have people dragging them to the left, where it's been made clear a majority of Americans are in the middle. But if you kind of set aside all that, there's still Democrats around that are mission focused. And one of those people is definitely the chair of the Democrat Party, Curtis Ertel. He is, he walked into that building on day one, laser focused on what he needs to do in order to, do his job as the Democrat Party chair. And he started off by focusing on the elections coming up in 2025. And I would argue there's probably a majority of Republicans who don't even know that there's going to be elections in 2025. And that's kind of always been the way it works, right? Republicans, look at the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Democrats are doing very well there. Republicans are not. Why? Because Republicans have been awful for years at turning out our voters during off elections. Non-presidential elections are very hard for Republicans. And I would argue that's because our party has historically not done the hard work to have the infrastructure in the ground game to get our voters to turn out and make them understand the importance of the elections.
And to hit on that, you're right, because obviously the last election was very engaged, very passionate. We got a great voter turnout. Everyone was hands on deck. And it kind of feels, especially kind of outside looking in right now, like everybody just kind of picked the ball up and went home and said, okay, we won. I'm just going to go back to my life. And I'm like, no, like this is now more important now more than ever. Because if you like I do every morning when I get up, I'm like, what happened in the news? What's President Trump been signing in? And I'm like, we got to get Congress to sign those laws, the executive orders into law so they can't just be flipped and the next time around. And everybody's just kind of being quiet. And everything that's going on in the next 2 years is going to be critical for that kind of progress that we're seeing in our country to continue. And yeah, everybody's just kind of falling back asleep on the watch.
I mean, everybody gets really concerned about who's sitting in the White House, and that's important, and we should care. And I am just like you. I am extremely grateful every day that I wake up that President Trump is there. I'm watching what he's doing. I'm extremely frustrated at the lack of ability on the congressional level to pass into federal law the things that he's doing, because they can easily be wiped away by the next president if we're not careful.
Why do you think that's happening? Because I had Lisa McLean on a couple of weeks ago, and I asked her that question, and she kind of answered it and said, yeah, we need to do that. But what's holding them up, do you think?
Okay, so some of it's a math equation, right? So we have a barely slim majority in the Congress, in the House, and we don't have, while we have a majority in the Senate, we don't have 60 votes to break the filibuster and get through some of the safety nets that have been used in the Senate for years and years and years and years. And that is that 60 vote threshold requirement. So when you look in the House across the country, there really are 3 to 4 vulnerable members that won districts that used to be that flipped districts. And Michigan 7, Tom Barrett sitting in the Alyssa Slotkin seat, is one of those seats. And those members, so all it takes is the Democrats picking off 1 or 2 members of Congress in order to successfully stop anything that Republicans want to do on the federal level. And so when you start to look, basically what the Democrats, and when I say the Democrats, I don't mean Chuck Schumer, I don't mean the Democrat Party, I mean George Soros and his organization of Democrat corporate political organizations that have moved money around, have funneled money around, that have impacted elections across the country. They have taken on a strategy to target these 3 to 4 congressional members. If you think that people standing outside of Tom Barrett's office on a Tuesday picketing is organic, it's not. If you think people flooding Tom Barrett's office is organic, it's not. This is all orchestrated. It's all being paid for by people like George Soros and other mega donors on the Democrat Party. All of these headlines that they are creating is being done artificially and very intentional by the Democrats to cause these Republicans. And I would argue Tom Barrett is going to have a harder time winning his reelection campaign than he will have last cycle winning that seat to begin with. Why? Because it's an off election year with President Trump sitting in the office, and Republicans usually have a hard time in the gubernatorial year turning our voters out to vote. And so Tom Barrett has to raise more money and fight harder to keep his seat this cycle than he did to win it last cycle. Now, once he's over this hump, I would argue he's going to be in a pretty decent spot. But he is, hands down, no questions asked, the #1 congressional targeted seat by Republicans and Democrats across the country in 2026. And everything that's being done right now is intentional. And it fits into this whole recruiting Democrats, right? This is their strategy. Marginalize and try to make vulnerable members uncomfortable, while at the same time recruiting candidates to run for local office, because Republicans just don't do that. And we should, because we overlook those seats all the time.
And this was the email that you posted about the Dems?
Yeah, so they sent out, the Democrat Party sent out a press release. This is one of the news articles from MERS that picked up the coverage of that press release. I think I posted an actual on my social copy of the press release from the Michigan Democrat Party. But this is a national movement. It's a national movement that's being funded by people like George Soros again. There's other organizations on the progressive left, specifically LGBTQ plus organizations, pro illegal immigrant organizations, that they realize what is the best way to stall the Trump administration and the changes that they're making. It's not necessarily to elect state representatives and state senators who vote in Lansing. It's to elect those sitting on local city council races, to elect people sitting on school boards, to elect city mayors, because at the end of the day, it is genuinely the people the closest to us that have the biggest impact on our lives. Think about it. You can't build a house without regulations or getting the approval of your local zoning committee, right? The thickness of when you build a deck, how tall the deck has to be, how big the deck has to be, all of the railings, the width of the boards, the space between the boards, all of that is dictated by your locals. Whether you can own chickens, if you have 1 acre, 0 acres, or 5 acres. I mean, there's townships in Michigan that you can't own a single chicken unless you have at least 2.5 acres, which is ridiculous.
You look at the solar panel farms too, right?
Correct.
I mean, that's all local.
Correct. It's all local. Mega sites, solar farm, wind farms, all of this is dictated by the local. The amount of taxes that you pay, millages, bonding, locals. Whether girls can play in boys' sports, locals. Whether your schools take ridiculous surveys, local school boards. All of this is dictated by the locals. And if you see the mayors, you see the mayor of New York, you see the mayor of Chicago, you see the mayor of Boston, all pushing back, saying our police forces are not going to help immigrations and customs. They're not going to help the FBI. They're not going to stand with Trump on these. That's because the Democrats have very quickly realized that the best way to put up roadblocks is to ensure that they are electing individuals to these oftentimes nonpartisan ran offices in Michigan. And I take a lot of heat when I say nonpartisan because everybody running has a partisan leaning. I get that. I'm not dumb, but the office itself is labeled nonpartisan. So take Livingston County here. For a long time, Republicans neglected our city council races, our library board races. I mean, even last cycle, if you look at the Brighton Library Board, it is some of the most progressive individuals in Livingston County, activists, like progressive activist individuals who push every single day on social media in our community to move Livingston County to the left. And they all ran unopposed for the Brighton Library Board. Not a single conservative ran against them for Brighton Library Board. Those are easy to win races, although they're nonpartisan, if you run the race correctly. And so, we've got to have, you see it, I see it. I have candidates all the time. I had 3 last week that sent me messages saying, well, I want to run for office, but I don't have enough money to run for governor. Okay, no offense. You don't have the skill set to run for governor. Like, check yourself. There's nothing wrong with run for city council, school board, township trustee, township supervisor. All of these positions are really important, and we need good conservatives running for them in these off election years because they are the ones that are really going to, they build a bench. The Democrats understand what they're doing. They're building a bench for the future, and they're building a local stall block for anything that Republicans or the president want to do moving forward.
And you're exactly right. And that's what I'm trying to do over the last couple of months is when we have all these people trying to run for all levels of office and rumors of people running here and there and making statements on, well, I'm going to run for either Senate or governor. I just haven't decided yet. I'm like, hey, can't we get a strategy? Can't we get a strategy, get the right people to stay where they're at? I firmly believe that John James should stay in Congress. We cannot lose congressional seats right now. I think he stays there, get an executive run for governor, somebody that's going to excite the base, somebody who's I think should be a self-funder because as of right now, the Senate candidates, they're all going to be having their hands in the same cookie jar because they can't fundraise. They're going to rely on all this national money to come in there and fund the races because they don't have a history of fundraising. And so we have to be more strategic in our approach and to have candidates, just like you said, Megan, if you have the skill set and you can dominate like being a commissioner, go do that and then build up from there. Or if you like, you know what, I'm going to swing for the fences here. I'm going to run for state rep if I've never been in office because I have a little bit of a following. Awesome. Go do that. But just don't think like that you're mad and you're upset at the government that, hey, I'm going to run for president or I'm going to run for Congress or, hey, I'm going to run for governor or Senate when you have no history, no skill set. And if the only thing that you're bringing to the table is that you love this country and you love this flag, that's great. But that, unfortunately, is not going to allow you to fundraise to beat the Democrats, especially in the general. And you're not going to win the primary. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the United States Senate seat for a while, because there's a lot of talk about why Republicans in Michigan just cannot seem to win that race. And we've had some good years in Michigan. We've had good Republican years. A big problem is we haven't had an open U.S. Senate seat in Michigan when we've had good wave Republican elections. That's worked against us. The second thing that's worked against us is the fact that the Democrats have been able to find a way to avoid primaries. Like it or not, they have found a way to sit down and in the sandbox, figure out who's going to run for the seat so they can avoid a very expensive and nasty primary. Republicans tend to have primaries. And so our candidates have to, they have to go through the primary. They have to spend more money. They have to beat each other up. And they're already bruised and battered by the time they get to the election. And now, after the 2 ballot proposals changed our timeline for elections, ballots go out weeks after the August primary. And so when you have Democrats who haven't faced a primary and have been campaigning for the general since April, May, Republicans only have 3 weeks to campaign, we're already shooting ourselves in the foot. Now, I'm not arguing that we have to sit down and figure out how to crown candidates, because I've been a victim. I don't want to say victim. That's an awful word. What am I saying? I have been one who is literally, when I announced for office, I had an elected official who's a man tell me that I have children. I should go back to cooking and cleaning and taking care of them. It's not my turn, and that I should wait my turn. And I was like, wait a minute. I've been around county party politics for decades. Who decides whose turn it is? If I don't know who makes that decision, how is anybody else supposed to know who makes that decision with as involved I am? So I don't like that, but I do recognize that primaries are very expensive for Republicans and have cost us political races. Now, with that said, I think we have to look at some changes, like moving our primary election, which is a whole other issue we can talk about at some other point. We should move the timeline of our elections. I don't like the ballot initiatives, but I recognize, short of somebody giving us $20 million, there's not a lot we're going to be able to do to change those right now. So we have to play under the rules that we have been given by the voters of Michigan. But there are things that we can do to kind of help Republicans as we move forward. So let's circle back. Democrats understand the importance of these races, which is why the Michigan Democrat Party is spending between now and April 22nd recruiting individuals to run for these spots. I believe that this is the direct job of the local and district parties with help from the state party. State parties should be working on raising money, setting up the infrastructure needed to win in 26. There's so many open statewide seats. I don't necessarily believe that they should be the head, organization responsible for this. That is why the Michigan Republican Party has levels. It's why we have local county party offices. They should know what city council races are open, who the I get asked all the time, well, how do you know who's a Republican? Your Republican Party should know who the nonpartisan Republicans are. When it comes to the races in Livingston County, the nonpartisan races, the judicial races, the school board races, I know who the Republican candidates are, and I know who the Democrat candidates are. And my votes on my ballot reflects accordingly. The Republican Party in your local community should absolutely know who these individuals are, and they should be able to recruit individuals to run for these races. Now, I would also argue that if the county party, working with candidates and district committees, can put together a GOTV, a get out the vote effort, there is a high likelihood that Republicans can win these races, right? Michigan is no longer Michigan is no longer in a persuasion campaign model. You're not persuading voters to vote Republican or Democrat. They know where they're at. You're trying to make sure that your voters turn out to vote, which is what the Democrats, there's a reason why Jocelyn Benson has decided that she's no longer going to allow clerks to keep the permanent absentee voter list, because she doesn't want you to get an absentee ballot application anymore. She's now saying that clerks can only keep a list of the actual individuals who check the box to permanently get a ballot every election moving forward. And that's why the Democrats are running, when they do their, absentee voter drives, they're encouraging people to check the box. Why? They want Democrats to automatically get ballots for each and every one of these elections. And I argue Republicans have to do the same, because
and we're not.
I will say last cycle, I did see the Trump campaign and other organizations were encouraging people to check the box when they submitted their AV application. Again, don't like the rules. Don't like that this is the way it is, but it's the reality. I don't want to
win
live,
if you want to change the rules.
I don't want to live in Neverland. Like, I'm not going to live in a land of what I wish our election laws were. I'm going to live in the reality of what we have to face. And the reality is during these May election years, where there's a lot of taxing, there's a lot of bonding, there's a lot of local initiatives that go on the ballot in May, Why? Because people don't turn out to vote. So if Democrats get election ballots mailed to them and they're outweighting us 10 to 1, 20 to 1, automatically off the get-go, that's just more room that Republicans have to make up. And let's just be real. We're not good at focusing on those elections.
Nope,
and they're going to overwhelm. They're going to continue to get people elected, and communities are going to, these red communities across Michigan are going to move further and further and further and further to the left. Look at Goshen. Augusta County couldn't be more red if they tried, and it was local elected officials that walked them off the plank to agree to this battery plant with China. Yeah. That was not state officials. Local officials had a huge part in that, and had conservative Republicans focused on who was representing them at the township level. That's an issue that we could have stemmed from the beginning and never let it get to where it is today.
So important. And again, people don't realize how they play the game, and they're very effective at what they do in their strategy. And if we just continue just to sit back and kick and scream about it, like they're just going to steal the election again. How many times did we hear that last election cycle? No, you play the cards that you're dealt. And that's the only way you're going to change everything, is if we win up and down the ticket. And to go back into being transparent, okay, I want to bring up what you sent me yesterday that you wanted to hit on with Michigan Transparency Network. Can you hit on this?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because last night I was at the Livingston County Board of Commissioners meeting where our county clerk received an award from Michigan Prime, Patrice Johnson's group, which has done such a fantastic job. So I'm going to digress for a second. After the 2024 election, they tried to FOIA Jocelyn Benson for a bunch of information. She refused to release it. So they ended up FOIAing county clerks. And if you've never FOIA'd county clerks for information, I have. And it's very interesting how they respond. It's not Republican and Democrat based. It's very clerk based. Some are going to give it to you for free. Some are going to redact information. Others are going to redact other different information. Some are going to try to charge you asinine amounts of money because they don't want to give you the data. Others are just simply not going to respond. So the Livingston County clerk not only responded, but she responded within 5 days, and she didn't charge them for information related to the election. So they were giving her a Sunlight Award for her advocacy in transparency. And I have submitted hundreds of FOIA requests across Michigan related to different things. And I can say that the Livingston County Clerk's Office is one of the offices that responds the fastest at the best rate out of any office that I have ever interacted with related to FOIA, from school board offices to townships to counties to the state.
Who's the worst?
Oh gosh, Jocelyn Benson. So Jocelyn Benson is by far the worst. And she tried to charge me $1 million one time related to a FOIA on the Michigan Independent Redistricting Commission.
That's a lot of deposit bottles.
It's a lot of deposit bottles. So that kind of plays into this, right? So last night I leave the Livingston County Board of Commissioners meeting talking about transparency in election data. I'm preparing for our podcast today where we're going to talk about some campaign finance stuff. And I go to the Michigan Secretary of State's website to do another lookup because I was interested in some data that I've been analyzing. And all of a sudden I realize that information that has been publicly accessible for years has now been moved all around the Bureau's website. And I know that they're doing an upgrade. They're moving away from the MERS filing system, which they should have done. But when you go to the main website now, I got this login that I was required to create a user account to access campaign finance data. I already have a user account because I FOIA the Secretary of State's office all the time. That login wouldn't work, so I had to create a new login. After I created the login, you now have to ask to be granted permission to access these disclosure reports. And then once I was finally granted access and I clicked on the button to access the log, up pops this box, right? It's the terms and agreements, I think is the technical terms and services that you have to. So after this, once you've been granted permission, and you actually open it up. Can you put back up the terms and services that I sent you? Do you have a copy of that one?
No, I do not.
If I text it to you really quick, would you be able to put it up on the screen?
Yeah, let me try. See how fast my techno skills are.
Let's see. I can also email it to you. Hang on.
No, you text it to me. I'll get it up. I'll produce the image and get it up here as you talk.
There we go. Okay. So up pops this user's terms of service. And I'm just like a majority of Americans, right? When up pops this big box, you tend to be like, yeah. Click the terms and service, move on. What am I doing? I download an app from the App Store. However, it's Jocelyn Benson. And so I decided before I was going to just click and accept her terms and services, terms and conditions, I was going to actually read what the terms and conditions state that I am agreeing to before I access the system. I got, I don't know, a couple sentences in and I was like, I'm not going to click this. I'm not going to access this. And so when you bring up this terms and conditions, basically, it says that the system, so this is the MDOS, so the Michigan Department of State system. The systems are intended for use only by authorized persons and only for state official business. Okay, that's weird. Which, by the way, I created a business login because we do a lot of FOIA, a lot of data analysis as a company, looking at campaign finance records for our teaching academy and everything. So I did it through a business lookup, not necessarily an individual one. But then you go on and it says that system users will not use the MDOS systems for commercial or partisan political purposes. Okay, I don't like, what else do you do with campaign finance? So if a competitor takes an illegal campaign contribution, I can't talk about that. If they take, donations from foreign entities, I can't talk about that. But then it goes on and it actually starts to threaten users who use the system in a way that Jocelyn Benson deems inappropriate, that they could be subjected to crimes and jail time, including prosecution and jail time. And so it goes on and it says that
I got it right here, Megan.
Perfect.
Yep,
okay. That's a text copy of it. I went actually this morning and screenshot the actual text instead of just copying and paste it, but that'll be good enough. So down towards the bottom, it says all users of the system give their express consent to the monitoring of their activities on the system. So now Jocelyn Benson is going to know every time you log in. She's going to know every lookup that you make, every piece of data that you do. And then she'll probably compare that to what you talk about on social media to see if you're using the system for said purposes. Now, this morning, I did discover another link that has some public disclosure where you can look up a committee search, but it doesn't really work. It's moved the data around. And so it's wash, rinse, and repeat. It's the same thing with Jocelyn Benson, right? As we continue to look into this. Somebody who was elected under the guise of being the most transparent Secretary of State in our state's history is running for governor under the talking point that she has been the most transparent Secretary of State. She is continuing to make it harder and harder for the residents of Michigan, for investigative journalists, for people who want to keep a watchful eye on the system to access the information in order to do that. And that has been her record. She says one thing and she does another, just like the rest of the Democrats, right? So here she is now threatening the residents of Michigan with jail time, with prosecution, with civil penalties, if they're trying to access what has been publicly available information for decades.
So what would that's unbelievable. What do they categorize as misuse? That's what I want to know. Is that like just an open whatever I want it to say misuse is, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to fine you, I'm going to imprison you? That's tyrannical.
I would argue that misuse is however Jocelyn Benson or staff members in her office are going to interpret misuse. But how many times over the past year, let's look at the incident with Sheriff Mike Murphy, where she has tried to fine him thousands of dollars for hosting a candidate at his facility at the Livingston County Sheriff's Department. But then she used her office to host her press conference, not following the proper rules and procedure by DTMB to use a state facility for those purposes. And she tried to say that one is okay and one is not okay. And now I think they're backtracking and saying, oh, well, we've reinterpreted and we don't necessarily think Sheriff Murphy committed any campaign finance violations.
That sounds vaguely familiar as rules for thee, not for me.
That's exactly what it is. She's been the same way since the beginning. If you look at when she first was elected Secretary of State, and the super PAC, the outside organization, was caught illegally running campaign ads for Jocelyn Benson. They spent millions of dollars running campaign ads, illegal campaign ads for Gretchen Whitmer. They were fined pennies on the dollar, where historically any organization that was caught doing that, any Republican organization that has been caught doing that, has been fined dollar per dollar. Whatever they spent on those illegal ads, that was their fine. And the Democrats did it, and it was like 6 cents on the dollar is all she fined them. So it has always been rules for thee, not for me. That's the way she's ran it as Secretary of State. That's what her record proves. She's continuing to prove that now as she continues to hide records. And if she's not hiding the records, she's definitely making it more difficult for everyday Michiganders to access this information that at the end of the day is their information. It is their data. This is state information that the people of Michigan should be able to look at and be able to see without Jocelyn Benson being able to pull up a log of how often you were on the system and what you were looking up.
That's unbelievable. Very believable on what they're willing to do. I mean, just look what Dana Nessel posted the other day about the executive orders. She says executive orders are not laws, full stop. And so I had to retweet and said, hey, do you remember when Governor Whitmer said these executive orders are not a suggestion? They're not optional. They're not helpful hints. And I expect all Michiganders to comply with the law. Like when she was referring her unconstitutional lockdowns. Yeah. So it's again, the elitist mentality that we deal with all the time with these people. It is frustrating. And the normal average person doesn't know it. Now, you and I can have this conversation and we're like pulling our hair out, but the average voter who just goes to work, comes home, and then when it's time to election time, and it's usually a presidential race, right? Because they're right. Not aware enough to go out to these local elections in off years. They don't have a clue of what's going on. And then they start kicking and screaming when something like the pandemic happens, and then it affects them personally, and then they want to have change, you know? So it is amazing how people just have short-term memory with this stuff.
You know, and I would agree with you. What's important to you and I sitting here and other strategists or other highly involved, again, I think I say it almost every podcast. If you're watching this podcast, you are exponentially more educated than the common everyday voter who tunes in right before election day. They figure out their details, who they're going to vote for, and then they go vote, and then they go continue on living their lives. It's just, from my standpoint, for those that are looking to run for Secretary of State from the Republican side, I've continually said that I think this is one of the most important races on the ballot in 2026. And it's for reasons like this. I knew there was something going on because, you know, I have spent years pulling campaign finance records. As somebody that, you know, has ran a training school, that has put together information for candidates, I have pulled contributions and expenses for candidates for decades now. I have analyzed where people are spending their money, how people are spending their money, Republicans and Democrats, right? How much money is being spent per vote in races by Republicans? How much is being spent per vote by Democrats? Where are they spending their money? Where do people view the focus at? Oftentimes I pull my hair out because I see how people are actually spending their campaign dollars. And it makes me, you know, I can sit here and look back at a race and say, well, no wonder why you lost. You spent 62% of every dollar you raised on non-voter contact. If you would have spent, you know, half of what you spent Grubhubbing yourself food on contacting voters and telling them something, maybe you would have won your race. And so like a week and a half ago, I went to actually pull contributions looking at Jamie Church's campaign because I wanted to further analyze contributions that were made to her. And every single time I did it, I got an error from the system that I couldn't download her contributions. And I went all the way down to the smallest possible, at first I tried to download every single contribution to her campaign committee ever. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's too many returns. And so then I took it down to the very narrowest, trying to download just one report, not a whole year's worth, just one report's worth of contributions. And no matter how I tried it, every time I clicked the button, I got an error. But when I went to download other Republican contributions of what came into their campaigns, I didn't have any issues. I was able to download all of those to analyze. And so it's just wash, rinse, and repeat, right? I shouldn't have to sit here for 3 days trying to access the system, call the Bureau of Elections, and still not get anywhere in getting this data. It's 2025. Cars can drive themselves. We should be able to get this data sitting at some type of electronic device with a click of our fingers easily and without the Secretary of State watching over our shoulders.
And just to go into that, especially with where people are spending money, I have to bring up, yesterday I interviewed Anthony Hudson, who is running for governor. Okay. And Anthony's history, if you weren't on the live yesterday, he ran for president as an independent in 2022. And, Trump obviously was running too. And then he dropped out, and then he decided to run for Congress. And he did raise a good amount of money. He raised over $117,000, $135,000, which I told him, I was like, look, man, that's a good amount. I mean, it's kind of like state rep amount, but for Congress, you're going to have to raise over $1 million. That's usually what it is in the general. I said, but if you raise $1 million, you're going to be relevant in the next 4 months. And I posted that live, and somebody started digging up his campaign finance, where his money was going. And he was drawing a pretty hefty salary, writing himself $2,500 checks, I think twice a month. And it was only like a 3-month period that I had the data, but he wrote a lot of money to him. And I messaged him and I said, hey man, did you take money from your donors as a salary? He's like, yes, I had to pay my bills and I wasn't working. I was like, just to let you know, this is a really bad look. And he defended it, and he said, there's nothing illegal about it. There's so many corruption in the deep state, and there's dark money, and I wasn't working, and I was only drawing like half of what I usually make salary wise. And I'm like, that doesn't make it right. Like, we talked, like, if you're going to do something like that, be transparent with your donors and say, hey folks, I'm running, I can't work, I'm going to take this much money every month, this is where your campaign money's going. And be transparent about it. I don't think people would donate to you, but you have to be transparent. And he's like defending that it's okay for him to draw a pretty good salary every month.
Yeah. I don't want to attack anybody personally, but here's what I will say. I have ran for office. The first time I ran for office was for state rep. I quit my job. I had two choices: take a leave of absence or quit my job. And I left my job. My husband is a police officer. They do not get paid a substantial sum of money. And so I ran my campaign, from April to August with not getting paid at all. Healthcare goes through me, not my husband. We had to deal with healthcare. I have a son that has all the IST, cardiologist, pulmonologist, neurologist, ophthalmologist, you name it, he's got it. I get it. Running for office at any level, from township treasurer to a judge to state rep, state senator, governor, Congress, it's a sacrifice. I just think at the end of the day, when people are giving you money, when they contribute to your campaign, they're giving you money because they trust you. They trust the message that you're sharing with them. They trust that you're going to be, especially on the Republican side, right? You're going to be a good steward of the donation, and they're giving it to you to win that election. And so, if that's what you have to do to try to make it work, honesty is the best policy. I agree with you. If I had somebody say to me, I'm going to use my campaign dollars to pay myself because I need to get paid while I run the campaign, my response probably would have been, well, why are you not running for a different race? Why are you not running for township trustee? Why are you not running for county commissioner? Why are you not running for something that you can afford to do and not put your family in a particular, financial position, or use your campaign dollars to live off of? But how candidates spend their campaign dollars, to me, has always been pretty mind-boggling. I have seen some pretty insane expenditures from both Republicans and Democrats. And there's nothing that drives me more insane than watching candidates waste money. People give you that money because they trust you and they want you to win elections. It's for voter contact. It's not for you to go eat on. It's not for you to go travel on. It's not for you as a personal slush fund. It's there for you to engage voters. In that may mean that's the cost of the events, in your district. That may mean that's your 4-H fair. There's a lot of different things that candidates can use as voter contact when they spend those dollars. But being honest and being transparent with your donors and thanking your donors. I can't tell you how many times in the past week I've had people say to me, I got an email or an invite for somebody for an event, and I went to their event, or I cut them a check last year and I never even got a thank you card.
Yeah, you're spot on. Well said on everything, because I agree with you. Transparency is huge. Be transparent up the front, but don't try to rectify the situation after the fact that you already spent these people money. We raised $2.4 million, unheard of as a grassroots candidate, by the way.
Yep.
96% within the state of Michigan, 94% of that $2.4 million under the amount of $200. So these are small donors. This is people's hard-earned money, and It would break my heart hearing the stories from these people where they would say, hey, I canceled my daughter's dance lessons to donate to be a monthly member. I canceled my subscriptions. I canceled going on vacation with my family. One lady said, I collect cans every single day so I can be your $20 monthly member. And it still breaks my heart because we came up short. And every single one of those dollars was a brick of responsibility in my backpack. Right. And it's so important to be transparent. And my favorite phone calls, number one, I hate fundraising. Absolutely despise it, just like most people. It's absolutely horrible. I get it. I hate cold calling. I did it for like a day and I told my campaign I'm never doing that again. I would rather build relationship and go on the road and ask for small dollars that obviously add up. But my favorite phone calls is we would get a list and I would see somebody that donated $10 and I would call them. And I would say, hey, Garrett Soldano, and they'd go quiet. And I was like, so what's calling? Thank you for your $10 donation. And it meant the world to them. It really did. And because it meant the world to us, because I come from very humble beginnings. I mean, in the beginning part of my life, we lived in a trailer. We didn't have anything. We hunted, we fished, we lived off the land, we burned wood for heat. I understand what it takes to survive, right? And I understand what these people were donating to that campaign. And it just really rubbed me the wrong way, Megan, yesterday when he came on and asked for donations on my show before I knew what he did. And I don't know if he's doing it this time. Maybe he learned his lesson. But for him to do that on my show, I was like, I came out and I did a video and I kind of ripped him and said, hey, look, to my followers, I didn't know this. Here's what happened. If you donated the money, the dollar that he was asking, this is where it might be going. And that's all I said. And just moving on from that, I think you're spot on. Transparency. That's all we want.
I would say transparency, but I would also say spend your money wisely and consciously. Correct. If you're sitting there at your campaign strategy meeting, or if you're deciding if this is how you're going to spend your campaign funds, ask yourself, if my donors knew this is what I was doing with my funds, would they be okay with it? And would I be comfortable explaining and defending why I'm spending my money here? And if the answer is no, well, then that's a pretty good, so it's not just about being transparent and honest. It's also about being conscious in what you're doing with those hard-earned dollars. Because you're right. Even look at today's economy. The money that people are donating is their hard-earned dollars that they're choosing to give you. And more than likely, they're making a sacrifice somewhere else in order to give you those dollars. And so we have an even higher standard that we should be holding ourselves to. And Republicans on a national level, we are we're struggling with donors. I mean, if you look at last election cycle, Democrats have people who are willing to give them money. Now, this could get us down into a big rabbit hole with Democrats funneling money through USAID and other progressive entities. And that's, yes, I believe that a lot of that has happened. I believe that some of that is probably continuing to happen. But setting that aside, Republicans still have a donor crisis right now, and we are still struggling to raise the money that we need to compete in elections. And so it doesn't help us when we burn bridges and when people see Republican candidates misusing those funds. We just have to be very conscious of that.
I mean, you're a Republican, for goodness sakes. Be fiscally conservative.
Correct. You know? I mean, and if you can't afford to run for the seat, that's part of it, right? Yeah. I mean, you have, as an individual person, you need to be able to afford. I always tell people when they sit down with me, running an election is going to cost you money. You think you might be able to raise every single penny. More than likely, you cannot. You're going to have some skin in the game. And you need to ask yourself, can you and your family afford to run for whatever office you're looking for? And at the end of the day, if you lose, are you going to be okay? And if the answer to that is no, then you probably have no business running for that seat, because you can't put your family, you have responsibilities at home. And I can tell you that no office, there's nobody among us, and I would say the president included, if you were going to tell me running for office was going to financially or personally destroy your marriage or your family or your relationship with the Lord, do not do it. It is not worth it, ever. There's no office worth running for that is worth ripping apart your family, your marriage, your relationship with the Lord for. None.
Well said. And that's spot on. 100%. I mean, because there is a tremendous amount of sacrifice when you do run. And I like your point where, hey, if you're not ready for that type of position, run at that local level and then build from there. And that's why I talk to people who, might have run for governor this past election cycle or in the past, or ran for U.S. Senate. I'm like, if you had a struggle with fundraising and you have a following, then go try to be a congressman or woman and then build the network, because that's what you do in Congress. You got to fundraise, right? I mean, that's You're always on the phone, you're fundraising everything for the party. And that's how you get those connections. And then if you're young enough, hey, do a couple terms, because we all love term limits, right? Then go into the next step. Hey, then maybe a statewide race, maybe U.S. Senate if it opens up, or governor and stuff like that. Just be strategic. And I think that is what I'm hoping. Jim Rumstead is coming on the podcast this Thursday to talk about the MIGOP. And that's where I want to have these conversations, is starting to get into people's heads so we can come together and have a strategy. I would love nothing more if the MIGOP, and it's probably not going to happen in this election cycle, but in my little fantasy world, I would love to have everyone that wants to consider running to get into a room and let's just talk. And let's bring it like matter of fact, here's the facts. And, we're not going to agree, obviously, but let's just get a strategy together and say, you know what, maybe you should be running for Congress this time, or maybe you should be supporting candidates. And that's why I refused to run this cycle. I did not want to repeat what was done last cycle and water down the race. I just wasn't going to do that again. I'm willing to play the long game and say, I just want to win. I want the state to be better.
Well, you and I are in the same boat. I've had some people encourage me to run for office, and everybody has their skill, talents, and abilities. I've been there. I've done that. Maybe one day. I don't ever, I've learned in politics, never say no or never. Because that's usually when God says, haha, boy, do I have one for you. But everybody has their place in politics, especially in Michigan. We need good people that know how to win elections. We need good people to ensure Republicans are getting on the ballot. We've all seen that, right? And I very quickly learned that, ballot access, ensuring that Republicans can be there to people to vote for, helping candidates run for office and showing them the way, especially on the local level, educating people. I'm good at. Not only am I good at it, but I really love doing it. And when you get people in politics that are good at what they do and they enjoy it, I don't want to set that on the table, because who else is going to be there to pick up those areas? So it's good to hear you say that.
And I tell you what, you have, and we appreciate you when you come on the show, because just like I said from the beginning, I learned so much more when you start talking and informing of us what's going on, because you have so much experience and you've been in it for a couple of decades, right? I mean, you've been in active politics for a long time, and it's refreshing to get that knowledge, to understand that there's people out there like you that are willing to do this. So, man, we appreciate you in your time for coming on just to educate all of us and inform us of what's going on and what you're finding. And we'll continue to do this. But I have to bring up, because this is my favorite part of the show, is the homesteading. I mean, how's the homesteading going? Like, where are we at? What are you doing? We talked about your daughter possibly want a donkey here in the future, and I got all excited.
Gosh, I sent you a picture of Mr. Tito. So, a lot of this, as we've talked about, is just me trying to figure out how to get my family to be healthier. I have struggled with my health personally for decades, since I was probably about 10, 11 years old. And it's been a roller coaster, up, down, up, down, up, down. I've had weight issues. I've just had overall health issues. And, my daughter's 10 and a half-ish now. I'm watching her. I'm watching my son and my husband, who constantly, he's above 40 now. And so he complains that losing weight isn't as easy as it was 5 years ago. And I just realized that there's a healthier way for us to live. And, it takes effort. It's not always easy, but it's a conscious decision that we're making as a family to try to move every day towards being healthier. And so, we've got rabbits. So right now on the homestead, we call it the Reckling Ranch. We've got close to 20 rabbits, I think. We bred, so my daughter shows rabbits at the fair, at the Fowlerville Fair. So we had to breed rabbits in January for her first set of rabbits that she will be showing. And you learn about life, right? So we bred 3 rabbits. 1 rabbit did not give us any babies. She did not take. The other rabbit had 7 babies, and about 3 days afterwards, it was cold and she tried to keep them warm and pancaked them all. And so we ended up with 0 rabbits from that litter. And then the 3rd rabbit gave us 6 kits. So we have 6 baby rabbits from her that my daughter will pick from to show at the fair. Now we are getting ready to breed the 2nd set of rabbits there's roasters and fryers. So the roasters were in January. Now we're breeding for fryers. We are going to breed 8 moms. So we are going to breed 8 rabbits, which means the Reckling Ranch is either going to have a shit ton of rabbits or a ton of rabbits, like order in magnitude, because rabbits can have anywhere from like 1 or 2 or 3 kits up to like 10, 12 babies. So we could have a ton of rabbits very quickly here.
And that animal, like, people don't understand, for efficiency and self-sufficiency, like, holy cow, do they reproduce? I mean,
every month
you can feed yourselves.
Yes. So we have basically, about a month ago, we ordered more cages. I think at the end of the day, we have 28 cages, and she has been informed that 28 individual rabbits in cages is the most she can possibly have. Everyone else goes to freezer camp. We have 2 boys that are ready for freezer camp right now. They're going to be processed here in the next week or so. And it's, they're kids, and I get it. They're their animals. We only have 2 rabbits in the whole rabbit condo that are off limits from freezer camp. Everybody else, mom walks in and, the kids have named them things like Marshmallow and Sugar. I walk in and I'm like, hey, pot pie, hey, chicken and dumplings. I am a constant reminder to the children that at the end of the day, these are animals and we take very good care of them, but they're here for a purpose. And that purpose is to reproduce for the fair and to feed the family. We sell rabbits to both ready for freezer camp, and if you're looking to breed and do your own rabbits at home, we would sell rabbits as well. So there's the rabbits. Then we have pigs. My daughter decided that she wants to do pigs for fair this year. So last fall we laid a big cement pad for pigs, and we have pigs coming towards the end of April-ish to get ready for fair. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Each kid can do 2 pigs. So we'll have 4 pigs on property for fair, both my son and my daughter. And then they want to do chickens. So we'll do chickens. She really wants to do goats, but we have to put up a new fence for goats. So we're working on that. And then in with the goats would be the donkey. And so mom wants a donkey. By extension, Annabeth wants a donkey. I really want mini cows, but those are kind of animals. The donkeys have a purpose, right? I don't want outside dogs. I do have a plot hound that does a great job keeping predators away from the rabbits and off of our property. But a donkey is also very helpful to keep predators off of the property and kind of protect the livestock, since I don't want, a sheepdog or something like that.
And as you can tell, like when you say donkey, it's not because Democrats are donkeys either. That's not because I smile. It's that when I look at that animal, every time I see a picture or hear him hee-haw, I just smile from ear to ear. I laugh, and I enjoy them. I love them. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Meghan, you don't have homestead, girl. You're a farmer.
Well, I mean, I grew up on a farm, so I grew up on about a 60-acre. We bred and raised thoroughbred racehorses. So my mom hated the horses. I didn't know how passionately she disliked the horses until I was an adult. My sister was not the biggest fan of taking care of the animals. That was definitely my dad and I's niche. And so I feel bad for my husband. He grew up in Sterling Heights. So we drive around and he sees a turkey. I mean, we were driving the other day and turkey season opens in a couple of weeks. And so we're seeing all the turkeys. We're seeing all the toms. My daughter's getting super excited. We were driving the other day and I was like, look at those turkeys. And he's like, you're going to make me crash, woman. And I'm like, those are huge. I'm so excited and I can't wait.
And how many deer did you get in the freezer this year? You had a goal. You came up a little short. I think I remember you saying, how many deer did you get?
So we put 10 in the freezer between my daughter and I. She put 3 in the freezer. I put, she put 3 in the freezer. While I was gone towards the end of the season, we had a great friend of ours who took one for me that we could process and put in the freezer. And then I got the remaining 6 of those. So we put 6 in the freezer. I put 6 in the freezer, but we have 10 total sitting.
You are such an inspiration. You motivate me. I absolutely love it. 2 things. What is your favorite meal that you like to cook with your rabbits? Because I haven't had a lot of rabbit in my life. So you got to educate me there. And then venison, like ground beef or the ground venison. What do you like to cook? Like, what's your 2 dishes? Like, this is my go-to.
Got it. So rabbit, my favorite thing is chicken. I call it chicken slop. So it's basically rabbit cooked in a gravy over noodles or potatoes, or noodles and potatoes. Okay. So good. It tastes like chicken. It's super tender. Why?
You fry that in a skillet, or you like do that in a crock pot?
Oh no, like in a crock pot.
Okay, so tender.
Oh, yeah. Tender, super slow, in a gravy, homemade gravy sauce. I haven't really, so I do all my own stock at home. Don't buy homemade stock. So anytime we're doing chickens, vegetables, everything just gets chucked in a bag and then it sits in the freezer until I'm ready. And I literally have a pot that is like it's huge. And I throw everything in the pot and, fill it up with water. And then I let it sit on basically a very light simmer for 24 hours, essentially. And then I strain it. I package it up in little things to freeze it. And then I vacuum pack once it's frozen. So I make all my own homemade stocks now. And so, that includes gravies. We make all of that homemade. We don't buy any of that canned. I haven't made homemade pasta sauce in probably 8 years now. I make all of that homemade right as I do it. So rabbits, definitely what I call it chicken slop, but it's really rabbits. My husband gets mad because I said, hey, do you want to have steak or what did I say? Steak or pork for dinner the other night? And he goes, I want steak. And we get done and he looks at me and he's like, you lied to me. That was not steak. It was backstrap. And I was like, well, yeah, it's steak. Like it's steak. He's like, no, steak comes from a cow. And I said, no, steak is a cut of meat. And it could be, at our house, it could be anything. You never know what you're eating for steak. I
tell you what needs to happen. I think your husband needs to brew beer and then you guys are set. I mean, you're ready to go. You got all your food. You get your beer. I mean, you might as well call yourself like Reckling Town or something. I don't know.
My husband and I are the epitome of opposites attract. I grew up on a farm. I will do all of this. I actually had somebody who works with me the other day. What did they say? They said something like, I'm a fake country poser, like I fake homestead. And 2 days later, I was sitting there laughing because I'm standing in my kitchen and I mill my own flour. So I literally buy the wheat berries, I grind the wheat berries, I sift everything, and I'm sitting there sifting my own flour. And I'm like, yes, I am a fake homesteader. How many people do you know mill their own flour? Okay. So I love dirt. I love country. I collect cowboy boots. Anytime I can wear jeans and a hoodie, I'm in. I have no issues. In fact, the other day, he hates driving the Bobcat. We needed to move it. I got out of my car. I'm literally in a skirt and heels, and it needed moved now. Climbed in the Bobcat in my skirt and heels, driving it around the house to get it where it needed to go. He is a golfer, so he has his PGA Pro card. He likes to wear golf shorts and polos. He hates dirt. Please do not ask him to get dirty. He will literally freak out. It's not his cup of tea. When I get home, I have the field processing of a deer. Once I get it hanging down to like a 4-minute like I've got it down. It's 4 minutes from start to finish. He begs, can I just go inside? I don't need to see this. If I see it, I don't want to eat it. We're getting ready to freezer camp the rabbits. That's on me. I process all the chickens. I process all the turkeys. He will eat what I make so long as he doesn't see me do it. So we are literally the epitome of opposites attract.
That's fantastic. Holy cow. Thank you so much. I love ending our show on that because it's so fun to talk, because it's very interesting. And I think it's great that you guys are doing that. And I hope with having you share those stories, it inspires people. And start small. We all know that. Start small and then build up in there, because I love the idea of trying to be fully self-sufficient. And when you made that post, I think back in the fall, where what your plan was to do, like, you know what, I'm going to try that next year. I would like to really go after that, because I think it's absolutely fantastic. Is taking control of your own nutrition and your own health. That's the way you get the optimal health of your family. So goodness gracious, it's so awesome to talk to you. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the show today.
No, thank you for having me. Anytime.
Yeah, we'll keep it up, man. We got to keep the progress of the Meghan Reckling homestead ranch going. So I will be inquiring about the hogs and maybe even possibly future donkey, Tito.
There we go. We'll see.
Have a great day, Meghan.
Thanks. You too. Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Oh, man, I love having her on the show. She is so knowledgeable. She really is. She knows her stuff. She's been involved for a couple of decades in politics, and I really like to hear her perspective on things and to really provide you guys with that information, because a lot of people don't know. And if you don't know what you don't know, you're not going to be empowered with the right decisions on what you want to do in life. So I like to bring these experts on, and I do consider Meghan an expert in Michigan politics. She's been around the politics for a very long time, obviously. So I hope you enjoyed that show as much as I did. I will be having Jim Rumstead, the chair of the Michigan Republican Party, on Thursday to update us on what's going on there and the infrastructure and the fundraising and everything else that's going on with the Michigan Republican Party, because it is all hands on deck. And as the races start to shape up, again, if you run for any level of office, make sure that you are bringing the right skill set. You're bringing the transparency. You're bringing honesty to the equation. And it's nothing wrong. You know, I know everybody wants to dream big and run for statewide races, but if you can't fundraise, you don't have the proper skill set. We need commissioners. We need school board members. We need state reps. That's where you focus and you build from there. I can't stress that enough. Okay. Have a great day. God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan, of course, and always God bless these United States.